Number 5. Polybius. Our first wretched tale is that of Polybius, an arcade game that hungered for a lot more than your quarters. Close your eyes and picture it's 1981. For most of you, myself included, I'm sure that's a little bit before your time, so just picture it's the first season of Stranger Things. It's the summer of 1981. School's out, you've got not a care in the world. Your goals are to kick back, bike around town, and spend your halcyon days popping quarters at the arcade. A new game appears that no one's heard of before, called Polybius. First appearing at an arcade in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, Polybius seems deceptively simple. A game similar to Asteroids, where the player controls a little spaceship firing and geometric shapes and patterns unfurling hypnotically. It's been said that Polybius was addicting. Far more than Pac-Man or Dig Dug could ever hope to be. Lines would form around the cabinet, fights over whose turn it was. And kids would go home and complain of nightmares, night terrors, hallucinations, insomnia, and an unhealthy obsession with the game, unable to think or talk about anything else but Polybius. And every few weeks, mysterious men in black suits would visit the arcade, observe people playing Polybius for a bit, write things down in notepads and journals, and leave without speaking to anyone. Polybius was a hit with the locals, with the machine seeing constant use around the clock. As mysteriously as it appeared, a few months later, the cabinet disappeared. Attempts to uncover the truth behind Polybius bring up nothing but questions. The developers, Zinlaschen, is a broken German translation for the words for senses and to delete senses. Records of the company are impossible to find, and no trace of the original cabinet has ever come up. But there are many online who insist that they experienced it in that fateful arcade in Portland many years ago. Subscribe if you dare, for we've got top scary content coming to you every day this October, and every day after that too. Number 4. The hands resist him. Take a look at this painting. It's nice, isn't it? No, of course not. If you don't have to agree with me, this thing is terrifying. Even looking at it through a screen makes me feel uneasy. This painting is titled, The Hands Resist Him, but perhaps you know it by its more colloquial name, the Haunted eBay Painting. They can't all have good names. This painting earned its reputation when it was put up for sale on eBay in the early 2000s, with a small disclaimer from the listers warning that while the painting might have a certain allure to it, that you should know it was inhabited by something evil. The listing claimed that the painting would change. The characters would change poses, claiming the girl in the painting would threaten the boy. Those who've seen the painting in person report feelings of great unease, discomfort. Those who saw it when it was briefly displayed in galleries claiming they felt like there was something there with them. Some going so far as to say they felt like there was something around their throat. Take a look at it. I mean, really look at it. Okay, you should probably tab out of the video. I don't want to be responsible for something happening to you. Most concerningly, the painting's first owner and the first person to ever have seen it publicly at its first showing both died under mysterious circumstances. The artist, of course, dismisses these claims as just coincidence, but that's what someone who painted a haunted painting would want you to think. Currently, The Hands Resist Him slumbers in the gallery of Kim Smith in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Originally, Smith had wanted to hang the painting in his own home, but was begged by his family that for their sake, they keep it away. Understandable. The painting has only been made visible to the public 6 times. And each time the viewers have complained of feeling ill. Maybe we should start to move on from this topic before it's too late for us. Number 3. The spider bite. Now this is one of my absolute favorites. I remember being told this one at a schoolyard when I was just a fledgling ghoulie. The story goes that a woman from frigid northern England, where the sun simply doesn't shine, takes a vacation to somewhere nice and sunny to soak up some rays and take a break from the dreariness of Leeds. Usually it's Mexico, so she journeys to Guadalajara. The woman, while sunbathing, is bitten by a spider without noticing. Days pass and the spider bite grows inflamed and red. She seeks out a local doctor who dismisses it as nothing more than a spider bite and tells her that it'll settle itself in a matter of days and she has nothing to worry about and should just enjoy her vacation. She continues on her vacation, but notices with each passing day that the bite on her cheek is growing slightly. She complains that it's growing sore and larger, and she returns to the doctor yet again. The doctor tells her if she's truly so worried about nothing but a spider bite, she should just take a hot bath and try to relax and ease her skin. She goes back to a resort, and during the bath, the boil on her face softens and bursts, and hundreds upon hundreds of baby spiders crawl down her face as it was an egg the entire time. Just delightful. Now, some of my ghouls might recognize this particular tale from the collection of haunted stories, scary stories to tell in the dark, made famous by its absolutely wretched illustrations straight out of your childhood nightmares. I'd wager that the charcoal drawing of the spider bite woman left an impact on you the way it did me. This book changed my life, really. I used to actually be a very normal, happy kid, and then I took this out in the 3rd grade from the library, and now I can only talk about ghouls, goblins, ghosts, and grossness. Number 2. Edward Mordrake. Edward Mordrake, as the legend goes, was a young, intelligent, and good-looking noble Englishman and a talented musician. A real Renaissance man. A man with all this going for him surely led a very successful and happy life, right? Well, unfortunately for Mr. Mordrake, he was cursed to bear host to a passenger, otherwise he wouldn't be on this list. Edward Mordrake, more famously known as the man with 2 faces, is said to have been born with a face on the back of his head. It's said that his secondary face was a malignant sort. When Mordrake would cry, his face would smile and sneer. When Mordrake would laugh, it would cry. Mordrake complained bitterly of his twin. He couldn't sleep and suffered from severe insomnia, claiming that the face would whisper to him in the night. It would whisper such things they only speak of in hell. Not quite a comforting bedtime story. Really can't imagine it was too easy sharing a pillow with a fellow like that. He would beg doctors to remove it, but was told repeatedly that it wasn't possible, lest he suffer the consequences, as the two were linked. The nobleman eventually couldn't bear to put up with the suffering anymore, and at the age of 23 was prompted to take his life. He left behind a note demanding that after his death, the face be destroyed and all remnants of it destroyed, for fear that it would follow him into the afterlife. The story of Edward Mordrake has captivated audiences for years, reaching its peak when Mordrake himself featured as a character on the 4th season of American Horror Story, Freak Show. So is there any truth to this, or is it just a tall tale? While no remnants of Mordrake were ever found, nor any written records, solely stories passed down from generation to generation. So whether or not it was real, all we can attest to is just how creepy it was. And number 1, La Euronia. I am so sorry to my viewers, that is definitely not how you pronounce that properly. Is one of the most well-known folk legends in Hispanic culture and has been adapted, told, and retold countless times. Let me add one to that pile. No one really knows where the original legend of La Euronia appeared from, although the one connective thread between all versions of the story is that La Euronia is the spirit of a woman who cast her children away into the water and spends the rest of eternity searching for them around rivers and lakes. In some versions of the story, she was betrothed to a wealthy Spaniard who abandoned her, and after being deserted, in a fit of manic rage, she threw her out into the local river. The legend is widespread throughout Mexico and Central and South Americas. The legend goes that you can find her late at night, clad all in a white gown, patrolling around bodies of water. Where it goes from here varies from teller to teller, with some variations of the story saying that she kidnaps lost children, others saying she attacks unfaithful husbands, and some meaner variations reporting that she attacks wantonly at anyone who sees her. Regardless of the local legend, all the stories can agree that when you hear La Llorona crying, you should get away. Now, the story has found its way to several Hollywood movies, TV shows, and more. Anyone else remember that pilot episode of Supernatural? Every couple years, someone takes a new stab at the legend of La Llorona, meaning it's unlikely you'll stop hearing about her crying anytime soon. Just hope the poor girl finds those kids someday. She's been looking for a really long time.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Ogopogo. Let's start with a famous one. Move over, Nessie. We've got a Canadian sea cryptid to discuss. If you've ever been to British Columbia, you'll know that there are plenty of mountains and lakes to explore. One of the more well-known ones, both for its picturesque qualities and supposed housing of a monster, is Lake Okanagan. Situated in Kelowna, this lake is famous for its vacation-friendly beaches. But if you head out looking for a relaxing day on the water, you might meet up with a strange beast. Sightings of the Ogopogo date back to 1972, but indigenous legends have been telling tales of the creature for much longer. It's described as a long, slender creature with many humps and a horse head that peeks out of the lake during thunderstorms. Sound familiar? While not nearly as famous, Ogopogo is quite similar to Nessie when you get down to it. Both are aquatic, hard to find, and attract all sorts of cryptid hunters. All sorts of folks have claimed to see Ogopogo swimming around, popping its head out of the water from time to time. Photos and videos are common, but none are really verifiable or convincing. Thankfully, the creature seems to be relatively friendly. For all these sightings and rumors, there haven't been too many claims of violence or aggression from the lake-dwelling beast. In fact, it's actually quite well liked by everyone. In the 90s, the Canadian government commissioned a postage stamp in honor of Ogopogo. Way to go. Skeptics all have their explanations for what it might actually be, with one prevalent idea claiming that it's actually a primitive whale that only comes out during calmer seasons. Regardless of whether it's real or not, what's more fun to say in the end, Nessie or Ogopogo? I'll let you guys decide. Coming in at number 4, we've got the University of Toronto Phantom Worker. If a film is being shot in Toronto, you're more than likely going to catch a glimpse of U of T's campus. The school's buildings are ornate and beautiful, perfect for giving a scholarly feel to any scene. A lot of the buildings have facades that date back to the early 19th century, giving them a timeless feel. Of course, with any buildings that have been around so long, there will be ghost stories. Back in the 1920s, U of T built a Gothic memorial to honor students who had died during the First World War. During construction of this elaborate memorial, many workers were hired to help out. Legend says that one of the workers fell from the tower while polishing the bells, a true Hunchback of Notre Dame moment. Ever since that fateful incident, students and faculty alike have claimed to see the ghost of the worker wandering around campus. Some even claim that there have been ghostly apparitions falling from the tower. Folks who don't know the legend will run to see if the poor fellow is okay, but never find a body. So much for being a good Samaritan. There are many other ghost stories surrounding the university as well, but none so stomach-dropping. Stonemasons with murderous qualities, little girls lost in planetariums, and a baker who managed to trap his mistress inside a secret room. The stories are real, but are the ghosts still haunting the campus? I suppose you'll have to pay the institution a visit and find out. Just try not to get roped into paying tuition, alright? That's scarier than any ghost story. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Nennerlook. We've talked about urban legends from the far west coast and the most populous city, so now let's take a trip out east. Known for its quaint, peaceful charm, Newfoundland is the last place you'd expect to find terrifying urban legends, right? I mean, you can get screeched in and end up with a scary hangover and only a faint memory of your previous night, but that's something else entirely. The monster seen near Newfoundland dwells in the sea, but does so unconventionally. How do you think sea monsters usually get around? By swimming, right? Well, this thing acts a little differently than most. First sighted by Sir Humphrey Gilbert back in the 16th century, it was described as a lion-like creature. This fits the description of an Inuit cryptid known as the Nennerlook. Legends of such a creature have been passed down through generations of people, but it was considered just a legend to outsiders until Sir Humphrey Gilbert came across it himself. The Nennerlook is a gigantic beast estimated to be as tall as an iceberg. It's got white fur, huge ears, and loves to eat anything that gets close enough. Seals are the classic meal, but it won't turn down a human if they get close. Now, back to that bit about movement. The Nennerlook doesn't swim, it walks along the bottom of the ocean. Yep, not the most efficient way to get around, but it gets the job done. Imagine watching a gigantic beast just walk out of the sea towards you. This is also the reason why people say that it's not really ever seen away from shore. It makes sense considering how deep the ocean is. But if you ever spot a little antenna poking out of the water, it's time to get a move on. And if you ever hear a deafening roar, it's probably too late. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Cabbage Town Tunnel Monster. We'll return to Toronto for a moment, you know, because of the urban qualities of these legends. Get it? Well, every tunnel system has its fair share of legends, and the Cabbage Town Tunnel is no exception. I'm surprised nobody's gone back and tried to get footage of this strange creature. Back in the 70s, a kitten ran away from home. While searching for his lost feline, a man came across a tunnel in Cabbage Town. Thinking that the kitten might have run in here to hide, he descended down into the abyss. Scanning the darkness for any sign of the little animal, he noticed some motion off to the side. Thinking it might be what he was looking for, the man pointed his flashlight at the movement and saw something he was definitely not expecting, neither cute nor cuddly. He claims to have seen a monkey-like creature with glowing orange eyes standing at half the height of a man covered in gray fur. If that horrible sight wasn't enough, listen to this. The man froze up and kept his light trained on the monster. The monster didn't like this much and told the man in an awful, trembling voice, "Go away. Go away." And guess what the man did next? He hightailed it out of there and didn't look back. This story made its way around for a while, but nobody ever properly looked into it. That is, until a year later. The man's friend had convinced him to share his story, so he went to the Toronto Sun with the scoop. A reporter accompanied him back to the tunnel, and they both scoured the inside. Looking around, they didn't find any evidence of a monster, but they did discover the remains of a cat. Some speculate that the tunnel leads to a point in the Toronto sewer system, and others have different ideas. Either way, nobody has seen the Cabbage Town sewer monster since. Would you go looking? Finally, at number 1, we've got the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. Heading back east for a moment, let's consider the Northumberland Strait. This is a body of water that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. It's said that there is a ghost ship that sails upon the strait, more often than not totally engulfed in flame. The legend dates back over 200 years and always seems to play out the same way. Folks on land will look out to see a beautiful schooner with pure white sails. As they look on, these sails will catch fire and the whole ship starts burning. Often people will head out on rescue missions only to find that there was never a ship to begin with. Legend says that the ship will only appear before a northeast wind, predicting a storm. So where does this ghost ship come from, and why does it always come back? Well, some people believe that the ship was captained by a pirate who made a deal with the devil. The ship had been fired upon and was burning fast. He wanted his treasure hidden and protected, so he signed the pact and sealed his fate. Now he and his crew are doomed to sail forever on this perpetually burning ship. Yikes. Now, skeptics will tell you that the ghost ship is simply a mirage, but if that were the case, then how do they explain the flames? How very Canadian, eh? I'm glad my homeland has some legends that can stack up against the big ones from other nations. There are plenty more where that came from too. Any real Canadian remembers reading all sorts of real Canadian ghost story books after scholastic fairs.
Number 5 on this list is the Comanches Speed. Apparently these warriors could move faster than anyone, and this lightning quick speed struck fear into any of those who battled them. Ranker says the Comanche tribe dwelled throughout the American Southwest from as early as the 1500s and are believed to be the first of the Plains Indians to have horses. They learned to use them with great effect. According to Mexican General Manuel de Mirateran, who faced their vicious onslaughts. Their mode of attack is generally by arranging the lances in front, the guns in the center, and bows in the rear. Their horses at full speed, accompanied with the fury and yellings of demons, they were among the bravest and most warlike of the Mexican tribes. These extremely fast attacks seemed to defy all physics and left their opponents stunned and usually too wounded to do anything but surrender. No one knows how they were so fast or if there was something supernatural about them. Most likely they were just well-trained warriors who acted swiftly, and the legend has snowballed over the years to represent these lightning-quick fighters. Whatever the case, it apparently didn't matter how fast you were or how fast your horse was. You were no match for the Comanche. Number 4 on this list is the Berserkers. I talked about these ancient warriors in a recent video where we looked at warriors that you wouldn't want to fight. We need to bring them up again though, because there's actually a crazy urban legend surrounding them, which is part of the reason why you'd never want to fight them. Wired says the legendary Viking warriors known as Berserkers were renowned for their ferocity in battle, purportedly fighting in a trance-like state of blind rage, howling like wild animals, biting their shields, and often unable to distinguish between friend and foe in the heat of battle. But historians know very little about the Berserkers apart from scattered old Norse myths and epic sagas. Accounts of the Berserkers date back to a late 9th century poem to honor King Harald Fairhair. The 13th century Icelandic historian/poet Snorri Sturluson described Odin's Berserkers as being mad as dogs or wolves and strong as bears or wild oxen, killing people with a single blow. Specific attributes can vary widely among the accounts, often veering into magic or mysticism. There are claims that Berserkers were not affected by edged weapons or fire, but they could be killed with clubs. Other claims say they could blunt the blades of their enemies with spells or just by giving them the evil eye. Most accounts at least agree on the primary defining characteristic: a blind, ferocious rage. The legends surrounding these warriors became so well known and scattered throughout Europe that no one knew what to believe anymore. It was widely thought that these people would actually turn into wolves and beasts when they entered battle, like werewolves almost, becoming incredibly fast and strong and impossible to take down in a fight. Whether this is actually true or not is still unknown. I guess that's what makes it a good urban legend, but still, an urban legend that you probably would never want to see face to face. Number 3 on this list are the Aztecs. The Aztecs were particularly fearsome warriors who did whatever they had to get the win, even if that meant sacrificing their loved ones to gain the power of the gods. Ranker says, the gods of the Aztecs never ceased to thirst, and because the gods relied on bloodletting for nourishment, the Aztecs thrived in a state of constant warfare with intent to sacrifice. Children began training as early as the age of 5 and earned warrior status upon capturing their first sacrificial victim. They then used clubs, bows, spears, and darts to disable captives, skin and dismember them before their hearts were finally gouged out. Aztec warriors were spiritually motivated, thus their discipline and ferocity are often credited as the forces that long ensured their victory. It's believed that these warriors had a strong relationship with their god, and it was this relationship and the sacrifices that they made that allowed them to conquer as much as they did. Godlike powers would flow through them and they were almost unstoppable. They were stronger, faster, and smarter than any other warrior when they were in this state, and they were almost impossible to kill. However, with this great power comes its drawbacks. They were also much crueler in that heightened state as well. A Spanish conquistador who battled the Aztecs and somehow managed to escape with his life wrote, anyone facing them for the first time can be terrified by their screams and their ferocity. In warfare, they are the most cruel people to be found, for they spare neither brothers, relatives, friends, nor women. Even if they are beautiful, they kill them all and eat them. Yeah. The Aztecs weren't above eating people either, and they would do that from time to time. Maybe this was their animalistic godlike instincts taking over, I don't really know, but it is believed to have happened. You wouldn't have wanted to face the Aztecs ever, but you especially wouldn't have wanted to face them after a sacrifice, because it would have been like facing off against a god. Number 2 on this list is the Cythians Fainting. This next entry details a very specific tactic that it's believed the Scythians used in combat. The tactic would apparently drain the opponent of sanity and may have included them becoming invisible. Ranker says the Scythians were renowned for the strength of their cavalry, but to their opponents, the Romans, Greeks, and Persians, the Scythians were also a deceitful lot. Rather than prancing straight into the fire, the Scythians found success with a tactic called fainting. With this tactic, they would retreat from the front lines, causing their enemies to just relax enough for the Scythians to return with a surprise ambush of archers on horseback. They were regarded as invisible menaces who starved enemies by scorching their land before proceeding with attacks during mealtime and sleeping hours. Those opposing them could neither sleep, eat, nor defend themselves with clarity of mind. Rather than riches, the Scythians cherished their ability to roam and kept few belongings so that their getaways were swift and their enemies reaped no rewards. It got to the point where any shadow that flew past or any sound of any kind would set off their opponents into a frenzy, thinking that it was the Scythians. They were able to get in their head, and rumors started spreading that they could be invisible. It was also believed that anyone who fought, their mental state would deteriorate quickly afterwards. This is probably all exaggerated through word of mouth, but I can understand how this could have been believed. If you constantly had to be on guard at all times with no idea where your enemy was and how they could strike, that would cause your brain to start messing up a bit too. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Maori Warrior ancestors. These ancient warriors utilized the power of their ancestors in battle and would grow extremely strong when they did this. Worshipping these ancestors, though, was done in a bit of a strange manner. Ranker says in 1642 the Dutch East India Company anchored its ships off the shores of New Zealand with sights set on inhabiting the mysterious island. The Maori, carved head to toe with tattoos, appeared the following day, prepared for battle. The Maori's main strategy was to ambush the enemy during the nighttime. In victorious celebration, they dismembered and supposedly ate their enemy's body parts, theoretically as a form of revenge originating from mythology. The Maori believed they were consuming their victims' spirits and nourishing those of their ancestors. So apparently these people believed that and eating their enemies would make them grow stronger in battle. Their ancestors would feast, and as they fed those spirits, they would grow stronger for their next fight. I highly doubt that this actually worked, but apparently they were pretty fearsome warriors, so people started to wonder if there was some truth to this tactic. I'm not really sure why their ancestors couldn't have just been happy with a really nice cooked steak, but I guess that's why I'm not a Maori warrior.
Number 5. The Licked Hand. This one's got many names. The Licked Hand. I always knew it as humans can lick too. The story goes that a girl is staying home alone on Halloween for the first time, with only the family dog to keep her company. While reading the news, she reads a story of an escaped convict the police are looking for and alert the neighborhood to be on the watch for. Naturally, she's terrified, so she decides the safest thing to do will be to lock herself in the house, lock all the doors, turn all the lights off, and spend the night in bed, letting the stress wash over her. She takes the pup to bed with her for comfort, and she drifts off to sleep, but wakes up in the middle of the night, hearing a loud, constant dripping noise coming from the shower. She's scared since she's the only one in the house and she hasn't used it, but chalking it up to just maybe being a leaky faucet, she tries to get back to sleep and offers her hand to her dog, letting it lick her hand to calm her down. The next morning, she wakes up and goes to the bathroom to see what happened, and screams when she discovers the body of her dog hanging from the shower. And written in the mirror in dried blood is the phrase, "Humans can lick too." Classic, absolute classic. It might be Halloween, but we bring you the scares all year round. I'll scare you on Christmas, I don't care. Hit the subscribe button and join us for the best scary stuff on the net at Top 5 Scary. Number 4. Poisoned candy. Trick or treat? Well, why not both? This is probably another one of the most recognized urban legends on this list, and inevitably every single October some small town will put out an article about it and people will start to get worried about the fear of someone putting something sinister in your little one's trick-or-treat goodie bag. This legend has gone back pretty much since trick-or-treating has been commonplace, but rose to huge mainstream prominence and myth status around the 70s and 80s, where it's now since become an endlessly reshared freaky story that happened to a friend of a friend. All kinds of variations on this one pop up, but the most common ones you hear are sadistic pranksters putting razor blades in candy, somehow, or poisoning candy, broken glass, you name it. One very dramatic twist is suggesting that somehow people would poison their kids' candies with illegal narcotics. Something I've always wondered about this particular legend. It always gets passed around, but no one ever stops to question just how much effort this would be. I mean, repackaging the candies, getting them in there. Like, outside of if you went trick-or-treating at maybe Jigsaw's house, I can't really see this happening. And even then, he usually gives you a pretty decent heads up. He has the little puppet explain the game. Now, despite the long-term popularity of this myth, it hasn't actually been proven, not once. A criminology professor from Delaware named Joel Best did a deep dive in 2019 on this phenomenon, studying police reports all the way back to the 1950s and found it remarkably inconclusive, stating that almost every single report of tampered candy comes back to being a hoax or ends up being a cover-up for something else. Besides the point though, as evil as putting a razor blade in an apple would be, giving out an apple already on Halloween is already dangerously delusional behavior, and that should be considered criminal on its own. Number 3. Clowns. Please tell me you remember this one. This was like a real problem for a hot minute. 2016 was the first time things were getting very weird. For a while, we were experiencing a record-breaking case of scary clown fever. Between Pennywise terrifying us from ever going near a sewer grate, Jared Leto terrifying us from ever going back to the movies, we were all on edge when it came to rainbow wigs and big shoes. Recent polls of Americans have showed that almost 40% of all Americans say they have a deep fear of clowns. It's understandable. Between the movies and the constant urban myths, clowns get a very bad rap. While North America was coming down bad with coulrophobia, we just could not stop seeing evil clowns everywhere. It became a trend, or plague, maybe more fitting, of people dressing up as their favorite terrifying clowns and just standing around the neighborhood, haunting and scaring anybody who passed them by. Naturally, this made it rife for urban legendary. All manner of stories came out of these sinister clowns abducting people, attacking people, and some truly dark legends saying these clowns were stalking their prey, but we don't know how many of these were actually true. You know, some people even wondered if there was a conspiracy going on involving a shadowy cabal of scary clowns working in tandem to scare people, presumably all driving around in the same little car that fit 30 of them. So what was it? Was it all just viral marketing for a horror movie? A lot of people assumed it had something to do with it, although the studios vehemently denied any connection. It eventually scared people so much that in the United States, some companies like Target stopped selling clown costumes and paraphernalia altogether. Some neighborhoods even instituted bans on clown costumes, really actually. They banned clowns, like the town from Footloose banned dancing. In the end, like all trends, it faded off, but that doesn't mean it won't still be in our memories for a long, long time. Number 2, the Bunny Man. Now, I've always been a huge fan of the slasher movies. Michael Myers, Ghostface, Voorhees, there's just something really cool about a big terrifying lunatic running around with a mask and a blade. It's kind of cool because it's the thing that only exists in movies, you know? It's not a real life thing, right? Well, enter the Bunny Man, a real-life horror story straight out of your worst B-movie nightmares. The first reported sighting of the Bunny Man was on October 19th, 1970. Right before All Hallows Eve. A young couple, an Air Force cadet, one Robert Bennett, and his young wife, were visiting family in Burke, Virginia. They drove down to Guinea Road in Burke, and at around midnight, the couple pulled their car to the side of the road. They say it was to visit an uncle who lived across the street, but I'll just say, yeah, I'm sure that's why you parked on the street in the middle of nowhere at midnight, but that's neither here nor there. What's there is that while the two were sitting in the car, presumably discussing politics and working hard, they heard crashing noises and noticed the front window had been smashed, and on the seats lay a hatchet. They saw something walking towards them, a man wearing all white with long white ears, screaming at them that they were on private property. The couple hoofed it, naturally, and told police exactly what they saw. A tall man in a bunny mask with a hatchet. Now sadly for all of our sleep schedules, this wouldn't be the last time anyone saw the Bunny Man. Not even 2 weeks later, a security guard, one Paul Phillips, was walking home at night down Guinea Road, where he saw an odd man wearing a bunny mask and a suit sitting on an unfinished porch. The security guard, braver than I would have been, approached the man to see if he needed some help. The Bunny Man then drew the hatchet he had hidden and began wildly slashing the porch, screaming at Phillips that if he didn't leave, he'd chop his head right off. Now, those two sightings back to back were the most widely documented Bunny Man sightings, reported to the police, and are most likely actually real. From then on, though, the townsfolk of Burke, Virginia, the Bunny Man would become an urban myth. Sightings and stories would pass around with all manner of sinister details getting added to Bunny Man's legacy. The truth is, the Bunny Man was never found, and to this day, no one knows who he was, what his deal was, or what manner of darkness he was hiding behind those big floppy ears. And number 1, the decoration. Who doesn't love a haunted house? Nothing like wandering through the dark and having a bored, slightly sadistic teen jump out at you with a scary mask. Sometimes they're pretty scary, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes they're pretty corny, you know? Plastic skeletons and rubber bats aren't that terrifying, right? Well, in 1976, a production crew was filming an episode of The $6 Million Man set in a carnival, and they needed a haunted house background to shoot with, so they went to New Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach. The crew began readjusting the decorations to accommodate all of their equipment, and the team wanted to take down a hanging mummy prop that was blocking a shot. And while the team was moving what they thought to be nothing more than cheap plastic and paper mache, they broke the arm of the dummy and then revealed the human bones inside of it. Yeah. Turns out the dummy mummy was a real embalmed human body. How no one noticed that is beyond me. But just think of that for a second. How many people do you think walked through that exact haunted house without knowing that cheesy little mummy was a real body hanging there with them?